They laughed at her. They ignored her. To them, she was just a tired old waitress in a cheap uniform, carrying trays and cleaning tables. But none of them knew that this woman had once saved more lives than they could ever imagine. The small cafe on the corner of Main Street smelled of burnt coffee and greasy bacon. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for a quick bite, teenagers came after school for milkshakes, and tired office workers ate in silence. Nothing special, just a typical American diner. But if you look closer, you'd notice her, the old waitress. Her name was Mary. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her face lined with deep wrinkles, her uniform always a little too big, hanging off her thin frame. She moved slowly, her knees stiff from years of standing on hard floors, yet she never complained. Not once. Every morning, Mary arrived before sunrise. She brewed the first pot of coffee, wiped down the tables, and set out the ketchup bottles. By the time the sun rose, the cafe was alive with chatter, and Mary became invisible. Customers rarely said, "Thank you." Most barely looked at her. Some snapped their fingers to get her attention, others made jokes about her age. "Hey, Grandma, don't trip with that coffee," a group of teenagers laughed once. And Mary only smiled faintly, her eyes downcast. The manager, a man half her age, treated her like she was a burden. "Mary, you're too slow with the orders. People are waiting. Pick it up, will ya?" he barked one morning. She nodded silently, even though she was already moving as fast as her body allowed. To everyone else, she was just another tired old woman clinging to a low-paying job she should have left behind years ago. No one asked about her past. No one wondered why she never took a day off, or why she sometimes stared quietly at the corner booth when the cafe was empty, her hands trembling slightly, as if lost in memory. There were little things, though, small clues that she wasn't who she seemed. She carried a small, worn-out notebook in her apron pocket. During her short breaks, she'd pull it out and write something inside with neat, careful handwriting. Nobody ever asked what she wrote, and Mary never explained. In the staff locker room, on the back wall of her small locker, hung an old, faded photograph. No one paid attention to it. The picture showed a much younger Mary in a white uniform standing beside men in military fatigues. But in the cafe, those things didn't matter. What mattered was that the coffee was hot, the eggs were scrambled just right, and that Mary kept moving. That night, just before closing, a group of rowdy college kids came in. They were loud, impatient, making fun of her every move. When she brought them their fries, one of them muttered, "Guess Social Security doesn't pay enough, huh?" The others laughed. Mary lowered her eyes, set the plate down, and walked away without a word. Later, as she cleaned their table after they left a pitiful tip, she paused. Her hand lingered on the ketchup bottle, and for just a second, her eyes filled with something no one ever noticed: sadness. A deep, aching sadness. Then she blinked it away, straightened her back, and kept cleaning. The cafe grew quiet. The neon sign outside buzzed. The smell of bleach filled the air as she mopped the floor. The manager locked up and left, barely saying goodbye. Mary stayed behind, finishing her tasks in silence. When she finally sat down alone at the counter, her body exhausted, she reached into her apron and pulled out the notebook. She opened it, staring at a page filled with dates and names. She pressed her hand against the paper as if it carried weight no one else could see. The clock on the wall ticked. Midnight. Another day gone. Another day unnoticed. But what nobody knew, not the rude customers, not the careless manager, not even her coworkers, was that Mary's story didn't begin in the diner. Her story began in chaos, in fire, in screams for help. A story written not in spilled coffee or dirty dishes, but in blood, courage, and sacrifice. And someday soon, the truth would come out.
The next morning, the diner opened like always. The coffee brewed, the grill hissed, and the smell of bacon spread through the air. Customers shuffled in, yawning, scrolling on their phones, not even glancing at the woman who served them. Mary was there, like always, smiling faintly, taking orders, cleaning up spills. Nobody thought twice about her. To them, she was just background. But sometimes little things slipped through the cracks. When a glass shattered on the floor, she didn't flinch, not even a blink. Most people would jump at the sudden sound, but Mary simply bent down, picked up the pieces calmly, and moved on. When a young soldier in uniform walked in one afternoon, she froze for just a second. Her eyes softened as she quietly set a free cup of coffee in front of him. "On the house," she whispered. The soldier looked confused, then nodded in thanks. Her coworkers noticed these small details, but never asked questions. To them, Mary was just the old lady who never quits. One evening, during the dinner rush, the cafe was full. Kids crying, plates clattering, impatient voices calling for refills. Mary moved between tables, balancing trays like she'd been doing it forever. At one booth sat a father and his daughter. The girl was maybe 8 years old, small and fragile with a pink ribbon in her hair. She stared hungrily at the menu, but the father's hands trembled as he counted crumpled bills on the table. He sighed, realizing he couldn't afford more than a sandwich. Mary noticed. She didn't say a word, but when their order came out, she slipped an extra plate onto the tray, a full plate of fries and a slice of pie. The girl's eyes widened in delight. "Sir, there must have been a mistake," the man said, frowning. Mary shook her head softly. "No mistake," she replied, giving the girl a warm smile. The father hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." Mary just walked away as if it was nothing. But later that night, the manager found out. "Mary," he snapped, "what's this about giving out free food? You think we're running a charity here?" Her lips trembled slightly. "The girl was hungry," she murmured. "That's not your call to make," he barked. "Do it again and you're out of here. Understand?" She nodded silently, taking the scolding without a word. But when she turned away, her hands shook as she cleaned the counter, and for just a moment, she looked so small, so fragile, and yet something in her eyes burned quietly. That night, when everyone had gone home, Mary stayed behind again. She sat at the counter, notebook in hand. The diner lights hummed softly above her. This time, she opened to a page that had a single date written in bold letters, September 11th, 2001. Her fingers lingered over the ink. She closed her eyes, and in her mind, the cafe around her dissolved. She wasn't here anymore. She was standing in the middle of smoke and sirens, ash falling from the sky, screams echoing through the streets. Her breath caught in her throat. She shut the notebook quickly, as if afraid someone might see, even though she was alone. Mary rose from the counter, turned off the lights, and locked the door. From the outside, she was still just the same old waitress closing up the cafe. But inside, her mind raged a storm, memories too heavy for anyone else to carry. The truth was coming. And when it did, the world would never look at her the same way again.
The cafe had its usual rhythm, the bell above the door chiming, the hiss of the coffee machine, the chatter of customers. To everyone else, it was just another day.
But for Mary, each day was another layer of silence, another act in the quiet play she'd been performing for years. Her coworkers sometimes joked that she was like furniture, always there, never changing. She smiled when they laughed, but inside, she knew they had no idea. One rainy afternoon, the diner was nearly empty. Only a few customers sat scattered across the booths, watching raindrops crawl down the windows. Mary stood at the counter, wiping the same spot again and again, lost in thought. The door opened, and a group of teenagers came in, loud and careless. They slid into a booth, laughing too loudly, kicking their wet shoes against the floor. Mary approached with her notepad. "What do you want?" she asked politely. Coffee and fries," one of them said. Another smirked. "You sure you can carry it, Grandma?" The group burst out laughing. Mary's hand froze for a moment, but she didn't respond. She just wrote down their order and walked away. Behind the counter, a younger waitress whispered to a coworker, "They're so mean to her. Why doesn't she ever defend herself?" The other shrugged. "She's used to it. Besides, what's she gonna do? She's just an old waitress." Just an old waitress. The words echoed in Mary's mind like an insult she couldn't shake. Later that night, when the cafe emptied and rain still poured outside, Mary sat alone again with her notebook. This time, she didn't open to the first page. She flipped further in, to a section filled with newspaper clippings glued inside. Headlines jumped out. "Heroic woman helps evacuate dozens from South Tower." "Unknown volunteer disappears after 9/11 rescue." Survivors speak of Angel in the chaos. The black and white photos showed smoke, collapsed steel, firefighters covered in ash. And in the margins, Mary's handwriting filled every corner. Names, numbers, memories. Her hand traced one photo. A man she had dragged from the rubble, bloodied but alive. She remembered his face. His eyes had been full of terror, then gratitude. Mary's chest tightened. She closed the book, pressing it against her heart. The cafe's neon sign buzzed faintly outside. No one walking past would have imagined that inside sat a woman who had once run into fire when everyone else ran away. The next morning, she came back like always, quiet, steady, invisible. The teens from the day before were back again, laughing, pointing at her. One of them said loudly, "She moves so slow, it's like watching paint dry." The manager chuckled along with them, shaking his head. "Mary, maybe it's time you think about retiring. You're not as quick as you used to be." For the first time in years, Mary's smile cracked. Her lips trembled, but she just nodded and carried on, hiding the storm inside. That night, she went home to her small apartment. No family photos on the walls, just a single box under her bed. Inside the box were medals, dusty, tarnished, but real. A folded American flag, and a photo of her, years younger, in uniform, standing tall among a team of firefighters, her arms slung around her comrades, smiling proudly. She stared at the picture for a long time, tears filling her eyes. To the world, she was just Grandma Mary, the slow waitress. But to history, to those who lived because of her, she had been something else entirely. something they had all forgotten. And soon, whether she wanted it or not, the truth was going to come back. The cafe didn't change. The same smell of frying oil, the same squeak of the door, the same flicker of the neon sign outside. But something inside Mary was beginning to crack. Years of silence, years of swallowing her own story, years of letting people laugh at her. It was all piling up. One Friday evening, the cafe was packed. A group of businessmen sat at one booth, while a family celebrated a birthday at another. The teenagers came again, louder than ever, tossing ketchup packets at each other. Mary moved from table to table with her notebook, balancing plates in her tired hands. As she leaned down to place a plate of burgers in front of the boys, one of them whispered loudly, "Careful, don't trip, Grandma. We don't want you to break your hip." The others howled with laughter. Mary's hand trembled slightly, but she placed the plate without a word and walked away. From the counter, the young waitress, Anna, watched in disgust. "Why do they always pick on her?" she muttered under her breath. But again, no one spoke up. That night, after closing, Anna stayed behind. She found Mary at the back table, scribbling in her notebook. "Mary?" Anna asked softly. "Why do you let them treat you like that?" Mary looked up, startled. Her lips curled into that small, practiced smile. "Oh, honey, it's easier that way. People don't want to hear the truth. They'd only see what's in front of them." Anna frowned. "What truth?" Mary's hands froze on the notebook. For a moment it seemed like she might explain, but then she simply closed it and whispered, "Nothing important." Anna noticed, though. On the cover of the notebook was a faded sticker of the American flag, and written in the corner, barely visible, were the numbers 9/11/2001. She didn't ask again. 2 weeks later, everything changed. It was a rainy morning when a man walked into the cafe. He wore a pressed suit, but his eyes were tired. He scanned the room as if searching for someone. Then, when he saw Mary, he froze. Mary didn't notice him at first. She was pouring coffee for a regular. But when she turned, their eyes met. The man's face went pale. His hands shook as if he'd seen a ghost. "It's you," he whispered. Mary blinked. "Excuse me?" The cafe fell silent as the man stepped closer. His hands shook. "Do you remember me? South Tower, September 11. You pulled me out. I never thought I'd see you again." The entire diner went still. Customers turned in their seats. Even the teenagers stopped laughing. Mary's breath caught in her throat. She looked closely at him, and suddenly, memory hit her like a flood. The man covered in dust, bleeding, trapped under steel beams, his terrified eyes, her arms dragging him to safety. She whispered, almost too softly to hear, "You survived." The man's eyes filled with tears. "Because of you." Gasps rippled through the cafe. Anna's jaw dropped. The manager, who had so often rolled his eyes at Mary, stared as if seeing her for the first time. The teenagers shifted uncomfortably in their booth, suddenly silent. Mary's hands trembled. Her secret, the one she had buried for decades, was no longer hidden. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a newspaper clipping yellowed with age. He unfolded it carefully, placing it on the counter. The headline read, "Unknown Woman Saves Dozens Before Vanishing into the Crowd." The grainy photo showed Mary, younger, her face streaked with ash, her eyes fierce. The cafe was silent. Then slowly, Anna whispered, "That's you." Mary looked down,
her voice breaking. I didn't want anyone to know. I wasn't looking for recognition. I just did what I had to do. The man shook his head. You did more than that. You gave me my life back. You gave me a chance to see my children grow up. Mary covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wet. For years, she had carried the weight alone. For years, the world had treated her like nothing. And now, in this small, ordinary cafe, the truth was finally breaking through.
For a long moment, no one in the cafe spoke. The rain pattered softly against the windows, and the neon sign buzzed outside. But inside, the silence was deafening. Mary stood frozen, staring at the yellowed newspaper clipping. It was her younger self, covered in ash, eyes blazing with determination, dragging a man from the ruins. She remembered the choking smoke, the screams, the falling glass. She remembered the weight of the man she carried, her legs trembling but never stopping. And she remembered disappearing into the crowd, not wanting her name in the headlines. She had told herself, it wasn't about me, it was about them. Now, decades later, here it was, her past, laid bare in front of strangers who had once mocked her. The man in the suit sank into a chair, his hands shaking. I've been searching for you for years, he whispered. I needed to thank you. My daughter was only 3 years old then. She's 24 now. She just graduated from college. I got to walk her down the aisle one day because of you. Mary's chest tightened. Tears filled her eyes, blurring the faces around her. Anna, the young waitress, stepped forward. Her voice trembled. All this time? All this time you've been here, cleaning tables, serving coffee, and we never knew. Mary gave her a soft, broken smile. That's how I wanted it. Heroes aren't the ones on magazine covers. They're the ones who just keep going, quietly, without expecting anything in return. But the cafe wasn't quiet anymore. Whispers spread like fire. The businessmen at the booth stood, removing their hats in respect. The family celebrating a birthday put down their forks, their eyes glistening. Even the teenagers who had once laughed at her sat in silence, shame written across their faces. The manager, gruff, impatient, always scolding Mary, took a hesitant step forward. His voice cracked. Mary, I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know. Mary shook her head gently. You weren't supposed to know. The man she had saved reached across the table, his voice breaking. But they should know. Everyone should know what you did. He stood, turning to the room, his voice loud, clear, and trembling with emotion. This woman, this waitress you've overlooked, mocked, ignored, she's the reason I'm alive today. She saved my life on September 11th, 2001. She pulled me out of hell when the world was falling apart. The cafe erupted, not in noise, but in silence, the kind that carries weight. People rose to their feet, one by one, until every person was standing. Mary stood there stunned, tears streaking down her face as the entire room looked at her, not as an old woman, not as a clumsy waitress, but as the hero she truly was. Anna stepped closer and slipped her hand into Mary's and whispered, "You're not invisible anymore." For the first time in decades, Mary let herself cry, openly, freely,
without shame. Not for the pain she had carried, but for the release, for the acknowledgement, for the simple fact that after all these years, she was finally seen. Outside, the rain eased. A pale ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, and streaming across the cafe window and touching Mary's face like a blessing. And in that moment, everyone in the room knew they would never forget her. Not the waitress, not the old woman, but the quiet hero who had once walked into fire and walked out carrying lives in her arms.